So, kind of a weird story. A rope, which was used for the execution of Saddam Hussein in 2006 for crimes against humanity, is now a much wanted object among online bidders. The auction has sparked criticism from human rights activists. Our UK correspondent Isa Ali has details.
This auction, according to a report in the Arabic paper Al Jadid Al Arabi, states that a bid has been put in, or several bids have been put in, numbering in the region of about $7 million, $7 million US dollars. And some of those who have bid for this rope include a wealthy Israeli family, two Kuwaiti businessmen, a bank, and an Iranian religious organization or foundation who presumably would want to display this rope in a museum of some sort. Now, all of those countries, of course, in some way, shape or form, were involved in a conflict with Saddam. Of course, the Iranians losing 1 million men when Saddam waged what turned out to be an 8-year war against them. So real interest there. Now, the person putting this up for auction is Dr. Maupin, who was the Iraqi National Security Advisor when the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein was executed. And he was actually in the gallows at the time when Saddam was hung, and he was one of the ones leading the back and forth with Saddam and his executioners. And he states that at the time of the execution, he told the men under his command to bring him the rope, and ever since then it's been kept in his home in Baghdad. And due to the security situation, he says there is no museum in Baghdad which could safely hold it, so he's put it for sale. So he's now going to get maybe $7 million, maybe even more, because the bidding isn't over. But it's important to note that he hasn't confirmed or denied that he will be selling it for more than that.
Now, to discuss the destiny of this rope, I'm now joined by political analyst Caleb Maupin. Caleb, thank you, as always, for being with us here on RT International. This is just a bizarre story. You and I were briefly discussing this in the break. Now, the rope is currently in the possession of the ex-National Security Advisor. How do you think it got into his hands in the first place?
Well, the way the execution of Saddam Hussein was carried out, it was carried out in a way that was meant to foment sectarian violence. This wasn't an execution that was just staged in a formal way, but it almost resembled a lynching, you know, with people from hostile ethnic groups shouting at him, and the way it was carried out. And the fact that the rope is now on sale is just a further confirmation of the fact that the execution of Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with justice. Rather, it was about profits. Iraq was invaded because it had a state-owned oil company that was in competition with Wall Street banks and oil companies. And Saddam Hussein was executed not for his atrocities that he committed during the Iraq-Iran War or any other atrocities he committed. He was executed for standing up to Wall Street and standing up to the forces that are really ruling the world, the forces of money and power.
Now, according to reports, we have several bidders, including from Iran, Israel, Kuwait, and we're hearing that they're offering large sums of money. $7 million was the latest bid. What kind of motivations would they have to have a piece of paraphernalia like this?
Well, when Saddam Hussein was aligned with the United States during the Iraq-Iran War, there were millions of Iranians who perished, or at least 1 million Iranians who perished as a result of his actions. But at that time, he was aligned with the United States. That's something that's not brought up in U.S. media very often, is the fact that at one point the U.S. was very close to Saddam Hussein and had an alliance with him. However, you know, it's important to point out that I mean, this just shows how cheap justice has become when they're selling the implements of execution for sale, when they're put up for bid. I mean, profits really dominate everything. Nothing is really sacred. If you look at all the countries the U.S. has invaded, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Yugoslavia, which suffered from U.S. bombing, never do they bring stability. Never do they bring peace. They bring further chaos and destruction. War is really motivated by profits, and this is just a further illustration of that. You know, the people of Iraq are right now in misery. There's a refugee crisis. You know, at least 1 million people have become refugees. Hundreds of thousands are dead. This is the result of U.S. invasion, and now the government that has been put in place by the U.S. invasion is so corrupt that the very implements used to execute Saddam Hussein are up for sale on the internet.
Now, let's talk about the ethics of this, if you will. Some activists say that the auction is inhumane and that the money collected should actually go to charities in Iraq. What's your take on this?
Well, the whole notion of auctioning off the implements for execution is really, really perverse. And it really illustrates what neoliberalism and capitalism really is. The U.S. said they were invading Iraq to bring democracy. They weren't really invading Iraq to bring democracy. They were invading Iraq to impose Western capitalism on Iraq and to impose the rule of Western banks over the Iraqi people. And that's what we're seeing here. And in the Western world, the neoliberal world, you know, everything is up for sale. Everything is made for profits. You have prisons for profits. You have private police forces. You have mass homelessness and poverty. This is the reality. This is the system that the U.S. was exporting to Iraq. And this is just a great illustration of that system.
All right, Caleb Maupin, political analyst. Certainly is a bizarre story. Certainly interesting to hear your thoughts on the subject. Thanks for being with us here on RT International.